Good morning. My name is Seth, your Detroit real estate expert. And today with me, I have Steve Frost, your mortgage expert. We missed last week, but we are back and on the road and on the show. Isn't that right, Steve?
That's right.
Perfect. So I do have a couple of things to touch on with the real estate market today. If you are on the email list that I provide to my database, then you will get the same information that I provided this morning at 8 a.m. So what I provided was that currently listings are up 10% year over year. So this time last year, we had 10% less listings than we do this year. What does that mean? That pretty much means that we have some more inventory hitting the market, which could be good news if you're a buyer, right? We still are at pre-pandemic levels. So compared to 2008, 18, 19, we still do have a significantly less amount of inventory on the market than we did moving forward. With that being said, pending sales are actually down 4% year over year, which is, I think they're down even week over week as well, which is unusual for this time of year. But mainly that is due to the unusual, not really unusual these past few years, cost of housing. So we are just shy of an all-time high at $2,858 per month for a monthly mortgage payment. And if any of you guys go out grocery shopping, my groceries just from I remember in 2000 late two or early 2020 going out and getting a full thing of groceries was like 60 $70, and now that same thing is like right around 150 to $200. So not only are you paying way more for your mortgage if you're out there paying a monthly payment, but you're also going out and paying for groceries and paying for other things and gas. All that is all combining and making people kind of struggle with buying a house, right? What else do I have? What else do I have? Mortgage purpose applications are down 2% week over week, which Steve will touch on here, but we do have some good news on the mortgage interest rates this week, and they're down 15% year over year. So last time this year, I think we were just starting with our really big ramp up in rates, right, Steve?
Yeah. So we're running about a 3/8 to a 0.5% higher right now than we were at this time last year. So we were trading like right now. I mean, realistically, you're trading just under 7%. You're like a 6.75 to like a 6.99%, depending on what your like qualifying information serves you. So but we've seen this we had a couple of really big weeks lately. So we had the Federal Reserve about 2 weeks ago came out and they said we're done raising rates, and they didn't say that as clearly as that, but they said, if they asked the question, they said, are you done with, or do you see another rate hike in the future if inflation stays high? And the Fed said, no, we don't. And so that was something they really haven't thought of. And that was the first time they've ever really signaled that they're going to start to, look at the next path, which would be cutting rates and dropping rates and things like that. But they've changed a little bit of what their target is, right? So the Fed has two mandates, okay? And so what the Federal Reserve does is they want to make sure that, number one, that prices don't grow more than 2%. And so that's inflation. And so they want the rate of the inflation growth rate, of the price growth rate of goods and services that we pay for, to rise at 2% per year. The other thing is they want to ensure that while they do that, we also stay at maximum employment. And so what the Fed has finally come to realize is that inflation is not going to go down as fast as they want, and it is really sticky. If you look at projections from now, the next 6, 7, 8 months, inflation is going to stay around 2.7% based on all the modeling and information that we have right now. So inflation is not going to be the big mover. So we say, okay, what else are we looking at? And one of the other big market movers this month was the employment report. We saw employment rate go to 3.9%, and we missed the mark on how many jobs that we were going to create. And so what a lot of the experts are now saying is that the Fed is not going to base their first rate cut on the inflation, because inflation is just going to take more time. And there's some things contributing to inflation right now that are very lagging, one, and another one that Fed funds are not going to control. So the one thing that's lagging is shelter costs. So the prices of homes and rent and things like that, that takes a very long time for that inflation figure to come down, and that is a big percentage of inflation. And the other one is motor vehicle insurance. And there's really no action the Fed can do or tool that the Fed has to change those numbers. So we know that's going to take a long time. So the Fed says, okay, the next thing we look at that we're going to realize we need to change our direction with the economy is going to be employment. And so they want to see less jobs produced and the unemployment rate rise in order to change their monetary policy. Like, Steve, that sounds like it sucks, you know? And it does. You never want to hear about anybody losing their job. That's not good. It's traumatic for a family and it's very trying. The reason that the Fed looks at this, though, is because when you have a really strong job market and inflation is rising, and the goal is to get people to stop spending money. And so when you stop spending money, corporations take in less money, the price of that stock goes down, there's less money for research and development. Now it's costing them a lot more money to borrow money, and you're slowing down the growth. But if you can just go get a new job at a higher wage, or you can take on a second job, or you can take on a third job, or you can add a job to your retirement, well, that does not allow the pullback in spending to occur in the economy. So a lot of the experts are now saying, okay, we are now looking for a change in unemployment to spark a rate cut. And so what a lot of the Fed governors do is they go in their meetings and they put in their estimates of what they think unemployment will be by the end of the year. And what the Fed said, or Jerome Powell said last time, is that a surprise uptick in the unemployment rate, which is right now at 3.9%, would probably make him have some concern and make him look at changing the policy. Now, he said a couple tenths aren't that big of a deal. He said that when unemployment was 3.8%. There's a group of 6 Fed governors that thought unemployment would end the year between 3.7 and 3.9. And there's 11 Fed governors that believe unemployment is going to end the year between 4% and 4.1%. So if you have 17 of these Fed governors thinking that the highest it's going to be is 4.1%, if we see 2 to 3 more ticks up, or tenths of a percent increases in unemployment, that would be deemed as a surprise. So that's the big number that the markets are watching for before we see this big move in rates. Okay. So that's kind of what's going on with the Fed. So what does all that mean? Well, rates went from, like, last week, 2 weeks ago, we were looking at rates like around 7.5%. And today we're trading just below 7. So that's not from the Fed cutting rates. That's just from 2 things. So one, that commentary, which I just explained, and I hope you guys all stayed awake and I made it simple enough to understand, because that's Super Geek Talk 3000. And to go up a level to Super Geek Talk 4000, the other thing that the Fed announced is that starting at the end of May, the Fed, Federal Reserve, and the Treasury are going to start buying back long-term bonds. And so a lot of what we talk about with mortgage rates is we watch the 10-year Treasury. I've talked about it on here. If we look this morning, the 10-year Treasury is currently trading at, oh, my ticker moved. Hang on. So the 10-year Treasury is currently trading at 4.39%. Interest rates ideally are on a spread of like 1.5% to 2% above whatever the 10-year is. Now, because we've had all this economic uncertainty, it's been trading closer to 3%, which would put rates at 7.3. Well, the spread is getting a little bit smaller. So now we're seeing that's nice, right? And we're also seeing the 10-year Treasury has come down pretty significantly, because what's going to happen is as the Fed starts to buy back some of these Treasury securities, there will be less of them in the market. When there are less Treasuries in the market, that means that the supply of those Treasuries are now going to closer match the demand. When that happens, you don't have to get as high of a rate of return on that 10-year Treasury investment in order to get people to buy them. So if you have to charge a lower return, you can charge a lower interest rate for the mortgage, and the mortgage tracks these things kind of in lockstep. So the end of May, we're going to start to see that take place, and we're going to get another employment report. And so as we move along, we're hoping that we do see the growth rate of inflation continue to fall ever so slightly, which it's doing, but also starting to watch for some of these cracks in the employment picture, and then wait and see what some of these Treasury purchase programs have to do with that 10-year Treasury rate. And ideally, before the Fed even starts to cut rates, we'll start to see a little bit of movement in these things. Slowly back, maybe toward the mid to high sixes, mid sixes would be really nice. That would do a lot of people a lot of favors. And it'd also bring a lot of people off the sidelines that are in the market, kind of waiting and watching things.
Beautiful. And how long do you
Wake
think
up
until
now. I'm back. Everybody wake back up.
that? How long
I hope
until you
that
think that
helps.
might happen, Steve, to where we would get to that point where it'd be like in that 6.5, 6.75 area?
I mean, it's just who knows, right? I mean, it's just a matter of watching the market. It'll be interesting to see going into June as some of these bond and treasury repurchase programs start to see how that impacts the market. Because again, as like the stock market's on an absolute terror right now, right? And with every up comes a down. And so as people start looking at these things and these treasuries are providing decent rates of return, it's a nice safe haven for your money, right? So maybe you're making some money in the stock market, you pull some of those profits out and you want to park it in a little bit safer place where you're still getting a return on your money. Then this is like your big pension funds and your banks. And you think a lot of banks that buy these long-term treasuries like this, they took an absolute bath because as those yields went up, the ones that they were holding on to became way less valuable. And then as companies are starting to take their money out of the banks don't have anything to leverage against because that asset the bank is holding is worth a lot less money. So there's a lot of banks and sovereign funds and things like that that are going to come to this treasury market and be like, okay, there's liquidity here now. The government's in there buying these things up. So it makes it easier for us to transact. We know that we can put more of these bonds in the market. We can buy them. It's just easier to trade, which is just liquidity, right? And when there's liquidity in that market, those things can be bought and sold. It doesn't have to be as enticing. You don't have to charge as high of a rate of return to get somebody to buy it.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve.
I'm sure everybody understands that.
All right, Steve. Well,
one other thing too to keep in mind, and a lot of people are out there like, hey, I'm going to wait for rates and things like that, and I totally get it. You have to do what fits you best, but I mean, we are now in like a pretty solid national average of like a 4 to 6% property value growth rate right now. I mean, if you think about it, if you're buying a $400,000 house, you're paying 20 grand more next year to hopefully save 3/8 to another 0.5% in mortgage rate when you can buy it now. I'll pay a little bit more for a year, have your equity in that home grow that you already own and come back and refinance it later. So, there's a lot of that cost benefit analysis when it comes to waiting and things like that, because as these rates drop, I mean, there's no, I mean, when the Fed lowers rates, that'll have no difference in the mortgage market. Like the mortgage market's already going to have that priced into it. We will know based on economic data that the Fed is going to cut rates. We will know that will already be on the rate sheet. So the day the Fed cuts rates, we're not going to be like, whoa, rates are crazy low. But what's going to happen is that is the greatest marketing machine in the world. So everybody's going to, like, Fed's cutting rates, like it's time to finally get back in the housing market. And you're going to see all these people come off the sidelines, a lot higher demand for these homes that are listed right now. So you're seeing like a nice little pop in inventory, right? Like you said, inventory is up 10%. So you see this little pop in inventory. Rates are secretly coming down. Like it's not crazy in the news right now, but rates are down the 0.5 to 3/8%. Like this is a time that you can move and get into some of these properties without having every Tom, Rick, and Harry in there trying to buy them. Keeping it clean.
Awesome. I'll make sure I clip that and put it on a little short for us.
Yeah, you like that?
All right, Steve. Well, we'll see you next week on Thursday next week, and we'll be back. Thank you so much.
Have fun.